My name is Forster, and I have spent nearly a lifetime trying to figure out what happened that could account for the staggering agony and deprivation on this planet. I set out on a journey seeking to answer questions like, is it even possible for humans to thrive? I found a code, a pattern in nature that's been embedded in arts and icons throughout the centuries.
Yes, there have been crashed craft and bodies recovered.
But who do you tell that you were involved in a UFO incident without them looking at you like you ain't wrapped too tight?
It's not etched into the rock, it's not carved, it's burned into the atomic structure in some extraordinary way.
I believe that they're giving us a model for accessing energy in a clean, safe, limitless way that could completely revolutionize the way all people live.
Right here in this toroid, we have enough energy to transform the entire Earth. And that's not just a theoretical statement, it's literally true.
The energy is extracted from the fabric of the space around us, which means it cannot be metered. That is a direct threat to the single largest industry in the world, energy.
The suppression of UFO phenomena is hand in hand with the suppression of so-called free energy.
An elite group of people and the corporations they run have gained control over not just our energy, food supply, education, and health care, but over virtually every aspect of our lives.
The way the system of medicine is set up, medical education is funded by pharmaceutical companies.
We have a privately owned central bank system disguised as a government-owned system.
There is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take.
It gives them the ability to print money in a way that the insiders are protected and everybody else is trained.
No matter where you go in the world, he who controls the money controls the world.
The time has come to say enough. There is another way.
If you want alternative energy, you don't ask an oil economy to produce it for you. We have to produce it.
The power of the internet enables us to share the depth of this research.
There is an extraordinary, fierce group of people who are taking this on.
We can make a real difference right now.
The simple power of truth.
We're not nearly as insignificant in our impact as we think we are.
There is a force that's more powerful, and that's the power of the people.
We can create a world where people can thrive.
Thrive. What on earth will it take?
I'm Todd Goldfarb. Let's tip this thing.
Forster Gamble, how are you?
I am doing great. How are you doing, Todd?
I'm well. I'm well, and I am really excited to be speaking with you, and honored, actually, because I know that your life's work and the Thrive movie, Thrive, What on Earth Will It Take, has just launched, and just really excited to have you here. So tell us a little bit about the movie, Forster. What is Thrive? What is this movie about?
Well, that's a big question. The title is Thrive, What on Earth Will It Take? And it's really an investigation into what is it going to take for human beings to actually be thriving on a healthy planet. And obviously that's a giant question, but it's one that's getting more and more urgent, and it's also one that's getting more and more answers. So this is one that I'm not treating lightly. It's actually one I've spent almost a lifetime investigating. I was a filmmaker in college, and this is the film that I wanted to make, but I knew that I didn't have the answers that I was looking for. And so I kept going until I had a sufficient sense of the coherence of the problems that I could feel like I could get traction in solutions. And then still I didn't want to put the film out until the solutions felt even more coherent than the problem. The last thing we need is another bunch of just bad news to pile despair on despair. So we're coming out with this movie at a time when we feel like we have a sufficiently accurate assessment of the problem that it can be really useful, but also very practical and coherent set of things that we can do, both in terms of large-scale strategies and then individual tactics that we can each do in our daily lives to actually turn this thing around, or as you would say, to tip this thing.
Right. Sure. Well, Forster, this is great, and I want to talk about the solutions that you provide in the movie and on the website. But, let's talk about the problems a little bit, because I have seen the movie, and, the way that you guys frame out the current problems and shining a very bright light, really, in the financial arena, on a select few, individuals and corporations that they run that are really controlling things. Now, we've all heard about this for a long time, and many of us have felt that this is the way that, the world is working. But you've really taken a very strong and clear stance on this, and I'd like you to speak about this a little bit and what you've actually uncovered in the making of this movie.
Well, that's been quite an adventure. We are actually, I believe, indoctrinated in our schools, in the media, in our culture, to think that all these problems are really confusing, and especially the economic ones. We need to leave those to the experts, because economics is such a challenging science. None of us lay people could ever really understand it. But what I found is the key principles are actually very simple. And once you start to catch on to them, then the way that we have all been duped becomes clearer and clearer. And fundamentally, of course, it comes back to money. I've spent a long time following the money, and it's not only who's got it and who's in charge, but what is money and who actually is in charge of making money. And the key part about money in our current culture is that you can picture it as if we're all playing Monopoly. But a few people, some of the kids on your block who are playing Monopoly for you, they happen to get to be the bankers, and they not only pass out the money, but they actually get to make it up anytime they want out of nothing. And then imagine how long it would take for them to win the Monopoly game, to buy you out of everything you've got and walk away with all the material wealth. And that's exactly what's happened. And it's taken about 400 years. About 400 years ago, the whole idea of central banking and fractional reserve banking, really lending out money that you don't have, came into existence, and people didn't really understand it. It seemed more convenient because, you could put your gold in a bank and they'd give you a certificate, and it was easier to carry around and safer to carry around gold certificates that eventually became, paper money, and exchange those than to actually have carry the gold around. But the bankers caught on to the fact that they could start printing these certificates for more money than they were actually holding in their vault. And it's grown and grown until the entire world, with the exception of a very few countries, is now run by a network of international central banks, national central banks in each nation state, but then organized into a superstructure of international central banks. And this is the money cartel. In this country, the Federal Reserve. And they've used that tactic, that deception, to basically destroy the lives of now billions of people across the planet. And now we're seeing it in movements like Occupy. People are finally saying enough. I know I'm getting screwed here. I don't know how. I'm not sure by whom, but I know I'm not going to take it anymore. So people are beginning to follow the money themselves, and that's a lot what this film does also, is it goes behind the scenes to see how does this system work, who's doing it, and how do we turn it around once we get it. Right.
So really, the inquiry is to shine a bright light on how the system works. Step one is really, hey, this is the reality. We're living in a time where the global domination strategy of wealth consolidation is here, and we all know about it, and we have the internet, and we have movies, and we have things that can shine a bright light on it, and Thrive is really attempting to do that. And then take the next leap, which is, okay, now that we really understand the problem, the situation that we are all in, now what do we do? Is that correct? Is that a fair kind of synopsis of what Thrive has been trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I think that's a great outline. You know, a lot of my background was in martial arts. I trained and taught in the nonviolent martial art of Aikido for 15 years. And so I was very steeped in the reality of if you're going to protect yourself, much less your loved ones as well, the prime directive is getting an accurate assessment of your reality. Because if you're defending against someone in front of you, but there's two people coming from behind you, you're out of the game quite quickly. So as unpleasant as it is, it's critical that we wake up to the fact that there are a few people who do wish harm to others. And this dramatic failure of the global economy, of so many people's lives, of the stifling, of the disappearance of the financial success and prosperity of the middle class, the environmental collapse, and so forth, that it turns out that this actually is a success for the agenda of a small group of people. And once you get that, and chilling as it is, once you get that, then the good news starts to come pouring in. Because we can, virtually all of the problems that I mentioned are man-made. And so people can turn them around. And the first step in that is realizing that it's a very few people. By my calculations, we outnumber the people actually perpetrating this agenda by over 1,000,000 to 1. So they desperately struggle to keep us afraid, sick, in debt, and not understanding what's really going on. And with the advent of the Internet especially, that's turning around very fast. People are waking up by the millions to what's really going on and stepping up to take action.
Sure. So, Forster, let's talk one last question about this financial piece, because your last name is Gamble, and you come from the legacy system of the Procter & Gamble fortune, you know, that whole corporation. So how do you hold that when you're the one coming out with your wife, Kimberly, making this movie, bringing it into the world, and are saying that, all right, well, we outnumber them 1,000,000 to 1, but part of me, and I think some people will think, well, is Forster one of them? You know, is this just simply a response, you know, generated by, you know, those that have a lot of wealth in some way, you know, to kind of continue the ideology of control?
Sure.
How do you hold that piece? Yeah.
It's an interesting one. You know, just even from the response we've gotten to our trailer on the Internet, which has been vast. You know, of course, I see comments from people speculating and concerned, and some I think who are paid to go in and make destructive comments on constructive websites. But yeah, I've been called Illuminati and a corporate shill and KKK and just everything you can imagine. But to particularly address the relation to Procter & Gamble, first of all, I will be forever grateful to my great-great-grandfather who took the initiative as a business person making soap and candles and created a very successful business. And with what got passed on to me in terms of my inheritance, which was modest but enough that I realized if I managed it carefully, I could actually spend my time doing what I chose to do rather than just having to make a living and trying to do some good on the weekends or something like that. So that enabled me to actually, right out of college, assess the situation where I realized we're destroying the environment, we're invading Cambodia, we're living under the threat of nuclear holocaust. We're in trouble here. And I knew I wanted to make films, but since I didn't know what I wanted to make them about, I dedicated myself instead to trying to figure out, is there a way out of this? And if I found that, then I would resume filmmaking. So having that financial privilege allowed me to spend my entire life following the questions that most people, if they have them, don't have the time to follow. Questions like, why are so many people suffering when we're living on such a gloriously abundant planet? Why do people treat each other the way that they do in so many cases? Why is there so much starvation and environmental destruction and violence and so forth? So number one is I'm really grateful to this legacy for affording me the time to go to the depths of this and come out with something that I think is incredibly useful. I'm dedicated to saving people the time that it took me, which was basically about 41 years of research, to try to put this piece together. Now, in terms of Procter & Gamble specifically, there's a lot about that legacy that I'm proud of. They were famous for treating their employees well in the beginning, and they were the first, one of the first companies to explore employee stock ownership, and there were a number of things that they did well. And then as they got really big and it got out of family control and basically just became a major multinational corporation, I saw them making the compromises that that frankly were really difficult for me to see. And I, along with other members of the family, have been relatively active for decades in trying to change their policies in terms of pollution, in terms of animal testing, in terms of how they treat their employees, what they put in their products. I frankly don't buy any of their products except some razor blades because I personally am committed to living a completely organic lifestyle. So that part I'm not proud of, and frankly I've divested as rapidly as is practical from the company, and I'm still a small, very small stockholder, and I use that to have a voice in the company as much as I can. And we've been, along with many, many other stockholders, somewhat successful over the years. Animal testing is an example. They're down to, I was told recently, they're down to about 5% of the animal testing that they used to do for all their products. I think that the animal testing was well intended from a human point of view, but unconscious from an animal point of view, and we're trying to get them to get rid of the last 5% as some other corporations have. So Procter & Gamble had nothing to do with the making of this film, except that some of my ancestors passed on some money that I used to try to get to the truth of this. So part of what I'm inviting other people to do, and one of the reasons why I named some names of some of the families that are involved at the core of these international banking cartels and so forth, is I recognize that not everyone in these families is even aware of, much less committed to, a lot of the kind of nasty agendas that are being perpetrated. However, if they're involved and have any leverage, then there's an opportunity for each person and each generation to wake up and get active, and it takes a long time to turn an ocean liner, about 2 hours, they tell me. But nevertheless, you have to start and you have to be committed to it, and then the direction can turn. And I'm already seeing with some people that I know in some of these corporate legacy families that young people are getting more and more active and more vocal in turning this thing around.
Good. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing this piece. It's and being transparent about it because it is something that, we think about when watching, these kind of movies. And to hear that other people like you that come from legacy systems are also making that shift is just really encouraging. And so I think that Thrive will, be a great example of that. Let's get back to the movie. A couple of things, because it's not just about the financial piece. The movie is very comprehensive, and you bring in a lot of topics, new energy, the fact that we actually have the ability to create new, clean and, fully abundant energy, right now, right here. And you also bring in things that like extraterrestrial and ET phenomenon. Taking in all these kind of like different things into this one movie, why did you decide to go that route? Why not just focus on the financial piece? Why bring in so many different aspects, that are seemingly unrelated, in one viewpoint?
Yeah. I think that I was born as what Bucky Fuller calls a comprehensivist. I've always been completely fascinated with how the whole works. And so I spend a lot of time connecting or trying to become aware of how the parts connect, because they are all connected. And the more we can discover it, the more useful solutions we can have. And part of the through line for me of this movie is that something that's absolutely clear to me from a lifetime of experience is that life is yearning to thrive. The life force is unstoppable. And yet, when we get in the way, it's painful. You know, if we slump in our bodies, it gets painful. If we run into someone else, it's painful. If someone has their property stolen, it's painful. So I realized there must be something in the way of our thriving, and I've mentioned that a little bit. But the real focus of the film, Thrive, is solutions. What can we do about this? Mm-hmm. And the core element of my research from an entire lifetime, you know, I'm an avid reader. I read thousands of books and looked at thousands of DVDs and talked with hundreds of teachers all over the world and so forth. And if I had to sum the whole thing up in one image, it would be this toroidal vortex that the scientists call a torus. And it's so fascinating to me that something that is that central is something that most people have never heard of. It's like, you know, fish don't really discuss water until there's a drought. All of a sudden they're flopping around, and it becomes very, very important. And to make a long story short, it turns out that the universe, as far as we can tell, has only one pattern which sustains itself in a continuous medium. That means like a whirlpool in water is made of water. But it's a pattern that we can look at and recognize and go, oh, that's a whirlpool. But it's really just a pattern of water. Well, it turns out that that all life is that. We're living in a continuous sea of energy, and even subatomic particles seem to be, as best we can tell now, just whirlpools in a vortex of energy that are shaped by consciousness itself. And given that this torus, which looks like a donut or a bagel, it's just basically a circular vortex, like a smoke ring, given that that is what the universe creates to sustain a system, I thought, wouldn't it be awfully useful for us to recognize that pattern, given that our life and death imperative is to find out what are the principles of creating sustainable systems. And so I became really, I would acknowledge, obsessed with this torus from high school, really my entire life. And I have been astounded at where it led. And one of the places that it has led is to into the world of new energy technology. And for many years I've been involved with various inventors who are actually accessing energy right out of space in what's called radiant energy or zero-point energy. Some people call it free energy, which is a bit of a misnomer, but it's a common name for it. But the common denominator of all the working systems that I've seen is that they all mimic this torus pattern, because it has to be an open system, so it doesn't either freeze or fry. It can pass energy through and come into balance. And it needs to resonate with its environment. It needs to resonate with the rest of the universe and all of those systems, from atoms to galaxies and human beings in between. They're all toroidal systems. So one of the reasons I go into all these different areas is once you recognize the torus, then it takes you into technology. And the technology is so life-changing if we can get it out from under the suppression that has been quite brutal in relation to it so far. Then there's hardly any way to describe how dramatically it would increase the quality of life for everyone on the planet. So I asked myself, are we the first people that know about this? Someone else must have known about this. So I started studying ancient cultures and found out that numerous ancient cultures have encoded this very specific information about the torus and its structural partner, what Bucky called the vector equilibrium. They've encoded this over thousands of years in stories and icons and buildings and so forth. And so then I thought, well, how could this possibly have been known thousands of years ago if we're just finding it now? And that's what led me into the extraterrestrials, because so often these cultures would talk about gaining this knowledge from these sun gods or beings that came down out of the sky in these flaming ships or something like that. So so then I went and talked to very credible people who have investigated in depth, talked to high-level military and government people, FAA investigators and so forth, and I really became convinced by an overwhelming amount of credible evidence that we are being visited and have been being visited by more advanced cultures than ourselves all over the world and have been for centuries. So as bizarre as it sounds, it makes sense that if someone were to actually be able to travel between planets, or much less solar systems or galaxies, they would have to have a way of accessing energy anywhere. And so that's how it got me into that whole realm. And then I would say one more piece of that is that when you apply the principles of the torus, which have to do with being centered in integrity, keeping its balance, exchanging reciprocally between its parts, things like that we can take apart and really apply to our own systems. If we apply that, if we hold up our economic system to the fundamental features of healthy living systems in nature, it's a tragic gap between what we're doing and what they're doing. So this system can teach us how to build a healthy economy, and some of the economists in our film go into that. And then the final piece of that I would add is, just to complete the picture, is that when you look at the human level, think, okay, well, if the torus is the basic unit of wholeness, the basic hologram of the fractal universe, then what does that unit of wholeness look like at the human level? And the key here is that the unit of wholeness is not the group. It's not humanity. Now, humanity is an outgrowth of the individual, but the individual is the fundamental unit. And when you look throughout history, what has excited people most in the French Revolution and the American Revolution and civil rights movement and so forth is this whole notion of liberty and true freedom. And what that means in my research is honoring as primary the fundamental liberty of every single individual. So the core moral principle is, I don't get to violate you or take your stuff, and neither do you with me, unless we're truly having to defend ourselves. And it sounds like the most obvious thing in the world. It's the one thing I found that everybody agrees to. But then you hold our political systems up to that compass, which we do in the film, and again, there's a tragic and really lethal gap between the systems that we've created in fascism, socialism, and communism, and even democracy, which has been kind of our shining light on the hill. But when you really look into it, even our Constitution doesn't mention democracy. The Declaration of Independence doesn't, because there's a famous saying that democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner. And liberty is a well-armed sheep dissenting the vote. So we actually have to look at how does this fundamental torus of wholeness apply if we respect the rights of the individual by not taking their stuff, even in the form of taxation, involuntary taxation, upon which every government in the world is based. And, it's one of the interesting things about this whole emerging Occupy movement right now is that they're embodying the quest for finding these principles. And so far, they're not selling out to any particular group or any particular ideology. And they're really looking for how can we make decisions in a way that doesn't violate people. And I saw a CNN interview with the police commissioner in New York City, Raymond Kelly, and he was kind of boggled. They were asking him, well, how are you going to, control this thing? And he said, well, we're not exactly sure because we just sit down with the leaders and we tell them what the regulations are and we issue them a permit if they say they'll obey them and so forth. But he said we can't find the leaders and they don't seem to be particularly interested in our regulations and permits. Well, I think that's a beginning. It's not to a world of chaos, but to a world of voluntary association based on a very clear but simple justice system that is designed to protect the rights of the individual rather than to give either the majority or a few people, a small group of wealthy people, powers over others that no individuals would or should have. So that's a long answer, but that's why it's so comprehensive, because we really need to to get a view of how these principles apply to everything.
Well, yeah, I'm not even going to try to sum all that up, but that was really fascinating, you know. And well,
that's where you go see the movie.
Exactly, and the link is on this website, so that's good. But I mean, really, what I really was trying to pick out sounds like the idea of the torus, which I had never heard of before I saw this movie, and probably many people don't even know what that really means, is really the central theme here, and it has to do from there, like recognizing this torus energy, you know, the way that the universe works, and really understanding this, you know, is access to free energy. It impacts our lives. It impacts how the world is set up right now in the financial systems. And I guess Thrive for 41 years has been in the making by you taking a scientific inquiry into this torus and finding all these other things and how they're all connected. And so I find this really fascinating that it really comes back to this toroidal field, as you said, or this torus symbol or way of kind of organizing energy that we have access to right now. Perhaps that's the real tipping point, that we are actually going to really have access to unlimited energy, and that really changes everything from within. It's like humanity changing from the inside out. Is that a fair summation?
I think that's a really important insight. I appreciate your saying that, because not only will these devices, if they're allowed to come out, give people access to energy globally, but it ushers in a paradigm. It's the evidence, it's the proof that people have been looking for that we actually live in a totally interconnected world of infinite abundance. And so it's bringing the social, the human, the scientific all together, and it turns out that mystics throughout the centuries have referred to this pattern and taught techniques of resonating with this pattern through chanting, through visualization, through certain mantras and so forth, because they've been aware of this pattern, because this pattern is who we are. Every atom is a torus, every cell is a torus, the electromagnetic field around our body is a torus. So the more we become aware of and recreate this pattern in our consciousness, the more we can clear our bodies, our emotions, our thought patterns, and keep moving our energy individually and as a group to the next level.
Beautiful. So, Forster, I want to touch base. This is the last question I want to ask. It has to do with the solutions in Thrive. And obviously, you don't want to give away the entire movie, because and the website is just phenomenal with all the solutions. But give us a general feel for, so framing out the problems, showing us that it's all interconnected. You know, this is all part of Thrive. And now, next step, solutions. What do we actually do? Because that's really where we're all living right now. Even people in Occupy Wall Street, I know, that are down there every day, protesting, are like, okay, like, we need to go further. We need to actually, make the change that we're all feeling. And you guys have taken a real clear stab at making that happen. So talk, give us a summary or an idea of what the solutions are that you guys are providing through Thrive.
Well, thanks for that opportunity. Yeah, that's what I'm most excited about. And let me take it at two levels. Just really quickly, at the macro level, the solution strategy level, I think that the key is to view through the lens of wholeness. So what does wholeness look like in your area of interest? Wholeness in food and agriculture looks like leaving the plant whole and honoring the wholeness of the ecosystem through organic farming and eating. At the energy level, it looks like accessing free, clean energy through resonance rather than combustion. At the social level, it's honoring the wholeness of the individual as liberty rather than authoritarian systems. As an economy, it's honoring the wholeness of the integrity of contracts, of the integrity of sound currency, of the integrity of truth and reconciliation for people who have been violating the ethical contracts with Main Street financially. And so I could go on and on to each level, but the key is, what would wholeness look like? Then then we think to ourselves, okay, well, what can I do about any of that kind of stuff? Sure. So that's where we offer kind of a top 10 and then numerous steps that we can take after that. And the first one of those is get informed, speak up, and connect with others. And we've spent years creating a really beautiful and fun and very useful website that can support you in going as far as you are ready to go in all three of those areas, getting informed, speaking up, and connecting with others. The next is bank locally. And we're thrilled to see, we're just 2 days after the National Move Your Money Day. This is something we've been encouraging for years, and it's really catching on now. We encourage people to don't put your money in the banks that are going out and funding the wars and the environmental destruction and all of those things, because when you put your money in a bank, they multiply that amount by 10 and then give it to those destructive powers. So if you take your money out of that bank, if you had $10,000 in the bank, you just took $100,000 of their lending power out, returned it to your local community where it can really serve the local interest and create a vibrant local economy and ecology. The next along the same line is buy and invest responsibly. So you vote with your dollars, whether it's a lot of dollars or a few dollars. You're voting every day with what you buy, with how you employ people, and if you have any extra, with how you invest. And there are articles on the website that can help you get in touch with the principles of doing that in a way that really feels good and highly leveraged. The next is quite simple. Just join a movement to audit and end the Federal Reserve, because that, in our country, that's the core of the scam that's destroying billions of lives. And I won't even bother to go into more of that here. We do it thoroughly in the film. The next is keep the Internet fair and open, because that is our nervous system. And there are corporations, there's the UN, there's political parties, the government, all sorts of people are trying to take it over. And whatever it takes to keep that open, that's our best shot. I have tremendous confidence we can turn this thing around, that we can really cross the tipping point, and that's our major tool. So we need to keep it, sharp and clean. The next one is support independent media, because that's how we find out what's really going on. You can't make really informed decisions and take highly leveraged actions unless you know what's going on. So support independent media, but also be aware of what's the funding and what's the motivation of whatever media sources you use. Next is support organic and non-GMO farming, and I've talked about that. And then in relation to I'm not a big fan of the political system from what I've said about the authoritarian political systems in general. But while we're transitioning to a more voluntary association society, that at least we can begin requiring election and campaign finance reform. So we get rid of corporate personhood and we take corporate money out of elections and vote for people who are willing to stand up for this kind of thriving agenda, and don't vote for the rest. Don't get suckered into the illusion that one party or the other is going to fix this, because these problems are being generated by money forces that basically run both parties. So you need to look deeper, and we've got charts and graphs to help you do that. The next one is advocate for this renewable and free energy, not only solar and geothermal and so forth, but lend your support financially and in terms of your activism to not putting up anymore with having these inventors having their labs raided, having them issued gag orders, and in some cases having them beaten or in some cases even assassinated. This is probably the single most powerful one, along with the ending the Federal Reserve. Will make the biggest difference the quickest. And finally, the 10th one, I hardly need to say that these days, is take part in what we call critical mass actions, where sufficient numbers of people mass together to express their outrage and to mobilize the power of the people around the critical issues of our day. And obviously what's happening with Occupy and what's happening all over the world in different countries is showing how viable that is and how powerful it is once people realize that they can get up off their couch, get up away from in front of their computer, and really do something positive.
Great. Also, where can people watch the movie and also look at the website?
Just go to www.thrivemovement.com, and you can stream the movie for $5 there. You can play it forward for a 20% discount to your friends. You can gift it to them. We're launching, along with a fantastic new technology called Play It Forward, that makes it really easy to share documentaries that have impacted you with your friends. And also through that website, you can buy the DVD. You can support spreading the DVD out to organizations that you know, and post it on your Facebook page, Twitter about it. You basically just get the word out. But that's the hub of information, is that website.
Sure. Great. Well, Foster, I will obviously be posting this, and in this interview, the link to the website will be there where people can watch the movie. And I just want to take a moment and thank you and honor, what you are bringing into the world and how you frame this out in conversation and in movie and in the documentary, because you're just taking a stance, that we really need to make change. And, I get it, and I think that the people that have signed on to the tipping point get it. And I just want to really thank you for this conversation and also for the work that you're doing. So thank you.
Well, you are welcome. It's an honor to be part of this conversation. Are you there?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I thought I heard you hang up.
No.
Yeah, I love what you're doing with the Worldwide Tipping Point endeavor, and I'm also glad that you'll be interviewing my wife, Kimberly, because she's been an absolutely core part of this, and she has brought into the whole project the feminine energy in a way that's just especially critical for facing these challenging issues and be willing to open up to where science meets spirituality. And she's also far more eloquent than I, so thanks for including us both in this exciting thing.
Oh, of course, my pleasure. I can't wait to get on the phone with Kimberly. Thank you so much, Foster, and we'll be getting this out to as many people as we can.
Okay. Bye-bye.